Stan Gibilisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV, Whiskey 1 Good Vibrations. I have some thoughts regarding the column by Tom Gallagher on page 9 of the June 2017 issue of QST, in which he expounds upon the challenge facing amateur radio operators in the coming years, particularly in regards to emergency preparedness and emergency communications. Our government is expending something on the order of $47 billion in an infrastructure and communications technology compatibility efforts to provide a worldwide fail-soft, I guess you would call it, emergency communications system. And that system, of course, is growing out of the internet as it exists today. And originally was spurred on by the September 11th, 2001 or 2001 attacks. And Tom invites input. What can we radio hams do to make sure that we don't become obsolete and to make our contribution to this growing challenge and growing technology? Well, I have basically a couple of thoughts that I'd like to share with you very briefly, because if I make the file too long, you'll stop listening and YouTube will stop processing it and this and that and this and that. But I got this sort of a mouth problem. Okay, I like to yammer a lot, but I got a couple of ideas. Number one, the internet will always, no matter how much it evolves, be vulnerable to outside attacks by cyber warfare, basically. And in fact, cyber warfare is evolving into one of the greatest threats to our country, the United States, and to all countries really in the world. That problem is not getting better; it's only getting worse. And I don't think this evolving network called FirstNet is by any means going to be immune to such attacks. If anything, the vulnerabilities will only continue to increase. So what we radio hams can do is make certain that a system that we deploy, any system that we deploy, will be able to survive any cyber attack. Now, to the best of my knowledge, no hacker can ever get into the IC746 Pro ICOM radio that's making the noises that you're hearing in the background. No hacker can ever get into that because it's not connected to the internet. It's not a software-defined radio, but it can be used with computers, but the computers don't have to be connected to the internet. I have PSK31 that I've deployed on this radio. Never has to be connected to the internet. So it can never be hacked. Cyber warfare can never get a hold of this as long as it has power. And that's the second problem, is the emergency backup power situation. In the event of a massive cyber attack, it's entirely possible that a large portion of the power grid in the United States and much of the world would go down for who knows how long, possibly months. Well, if the power goes down because of a severe storm here in the Deadwood, South Dakota area, and we have pretty severe thunderstorms in the summer, lightning storms, and winter storms that can knock the power out sometimes for days. I have a backup generator. It runs off gasoline. I have an uninterruptible power supply that gives me time to hook up the generator. If I'm on the radio, I have a few minutes to hook that thing up, and I can remain on the air uninterrupted. But for one problem. I've got about 10 gallons of gasoline. When that gasoline runs out, I'm screwed. Now, I could have a solar backup, but I haven't deployed such a thing yet. They have solar backup systems, but I don't right now have the money to do that. But that is one of the things that we have to be able to do, is ensure that we have the emergency power preparedness to survive for a long time without the utility power that's available from the power companies, because that we could lose that in a cyber warfare attack, an electromagnetic pulse attack, a hydrogen bomb or several hydrogen bombs detonated at a couple of 100 miles altitude could sufficiently damage the infrastructure, so they say, to knock power out for a long time, and the system just does not have backup parts to contend with all of that. So we need to ensure that we can stay on the air when the utility power fails, even for a long time. We can't recharge the batteries with the commercial mains. Once the batteries run dry, we have to have solar and or wind or tidal or some kind of natural source that doesn't die when there's a cyber attack. So the last time I heard, they could not hack the sun, they could not hack the wind, and they can't hack the ionosphere either, and that is another important thing that we need to keep in mind. After a month without utility power, you won't hear very many radio hams on the bands, no matter what kind of emergency power system you have, because there just won't be very many left. So we need to develop some kind of a paradigm by which we can designate certain frequencies in all of the HF bands. I suggest 5 kilohertz above or below the top band limits, the upper frequency limit of each and every HF band, so that we can ensure that we know where to look for the few remaining stations that have had the foresight to provide this long-term emergency backup power structure for themselves. So some sort of communications can be maintained, and even at VHF, no one can hack the tropospheric propagation mechanism. No one can hack meteor scatter the last time I tried, nor can they hack auroral communication, nor can they hack moon bounce communication. And besides, a lot of the hackers will be put out of business too when they'll be sort of like cutting off their own life support system, as it were. One may wonder, is the world even going to be worth living in under such conditions? But that's a philosophical question, and it's a question that it makes no sense to ask. It makes no sense to think about. Tom Gallagher didn't ask me whether or not life would be worth living after Armageddon. But he does imply that we might want to think about how we, as radio amateurs, can stay one step ahead of everything and all technologies. And ironically, one of the ways that we can stay one step ahead of all of that stuff is to keep our sense of enjoyment in what we do, to keep our maverick, rogue sense of experimentation and innovation, to work outside the box, always think outside the box, at least once in a while. Always, at least once in a while. So those are basically the suggestions I have. Make sure that we have some way to stay on the air for a long time without the existing infrastructure. Because someday, if worst comes to worst, we will be the only ones left after all else has failed. Even the $47 billion FirstNet system. Stan Gibilisco signing off, saying 73, and in my native fist, so long, translating to da-da-da-da-da-da.